A 19-year-old MIT dropout heads to Silicon Valley with a radical idea. He's going to turn raw data into the weapon every AI needs. 3 years later, his company is worth $13 billion. The Pentagon takes notice, and soon, this kid from New Mexico isn't just building software. He's powering America's most advanced military AI. His parents left China with PhDs in physics, part of the wave of foreign talent America has always turned into power. They didn't come for money, they came for freedom. Now their American-born son runs the hidden infrastructure behind the Pentagon's AI arsenal, the invisible code that could tip the balance in the next great war. And while the world was distracted by OpenAI and Google, he quietly became one of the youngest billionaires in history by building America's most dangerous weapon in the AI arms race. But who is he? And how did he get here? This is where his story begins. His name is Alexandr Wang. He was born in Los Alamos, New Mexico, the cradle of the atomic bomb, and now the birthplace of America's next weapon. Wang's parents immigrated from China in the 1980s, carrying physics degrees and an unshakable belief in the American dream. They found work at the same laboratory where immigrant scientists had once helped America win World War II. But getting security clearance as Chinese nationals wasn't easy. Years of background checks, interviews, scrutiny. They persevered because they believed their sacrifices would give their future children opportunities that didn't exist in the China they'd left behind. While other kids played video games, young Alexander grew up surrounded by the language of science and war. The dinner table wasn't about sports. It was about quantum mechanics, atomic history, and the cutting edge of human knowledge. But Wang wasn't interested in physics. He was obsessed with teaching machines to see patterns. By 16, he was dominating international math Olympiads, solving problems that would make MIT professors sweat. His mind worked differently, faster, more intuitively. He could see order where others saw chaos. By 19, he dropped out of MIT for Silicon Valley. His parents were horrified. They'd sacrificed everything for his education. But Wang saw AI's biggest problem. It wasn't smart algorithms. It was dumb data. And that problem would become the foundation of his empire. What began as a startup in a tiny San Francisco office would soon place him at the crossroads of power. First in Washington, and later in Silicon Valley's biggest empire. It's 2016. Every AI company had the same dirty secret. Their algorithms were only as good as their training data, and most of their data was garbage. Self-driving cars needed millions of labeled images to recognize stop signs. Medical AI needed annotated scans to detect cancer. Military drones needed tagged footage to tell civilians from targets. But labeling data was slow, expensive, and mind-numbingly boring. Companies were drowning in unlabeled information. It was like having a library full of books written in a language no one could read. And without that language, no machine could think. Wang co-founded Scale AI with his partner Lucy Guo, a former Snapchat engineer who'd also dropped out of Carnegie Mellon. Together, they had a revolutionary premise: build the world's most sophisticated data labeling operation. While other startups chased consumer apps, Wang bet everything on invisible infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that could one day decide who wins wars. But first, they had to prove anyone would pay for it. Their first client was struggling with autonomous vehicles. The company had millions of hours of driving footage, but no way to label all the cars, pedestrians, and traffic signs their AI needed to recognize. Wang's team worked around the clock, building custom tools and training specialized annotators. They delivered perfectly labeled datasets that made their clients' AI 10 times more accurate. But behind the scenes, Scale relied on a massive global workforce, many working through a platform called remote tasks. Paid pennies per task, some workers described the job as digital sweatshop labor. It was a trade-off: To build world-class AI, someone had to do the world's most boring work, at scale. The results were so impressive, the client immediately signed a six-figure extension. Word spread like wildfire. Soon, it would spread beyond Silicon Valley and straight into the Pentagon. By 2018, the whispers had become a single call, a call that changed everything. The voice was crisp, professional, spoken in the careful language of someone accustomed to classified conversations. The Pentagon had heard about Scale AI's work. They had a problem. Could he come to Washington? Days later, he was inside the Pentagon. Wang walked into a room full of generals, intelligence officials, and defense contractors. The atmosphere was tense. America feared it was losing the AI race. And in that room, the fear felt real. China had been pouring billions into AI research. Their surveillance state gave them vast amounts of data. Their tech companies were building systems that seemed to surpass American capabilities. But America had a different problem. The Pentagon was drowning in information. Every day, satellites captured terabytes of imagery. Drones recorded hours of footage from conflict zones. Intelligence agencies collected massive amounts of data from signals intercepts and human sources, but they couldn't process it fast enough. Critical intelligence was getting buried in digital haystacks. Threats were being missed. The Pentagon didn't just need algorithms, they needed vision, and Wang was about to give it to them. February 24th, 2022. Russian tanks roll across the border. Ukraine responds with unexpected speed and precision. Drones track enemy movements. Artillery strikes land with shocking accuracy. Satellite imagery gets turned into battlefield decisions in hours, not weeks. This wasn't just heroism. It was infrastructure. Early on, much of Ukraine's tech came from local ingenuity. Platforms like Aerorozvidka and Delta. But as the war evolved, so did the need for faster, smarter targeting systems, powered by AI. That's when Alexandr Wang's influence showed up, quietly and at scale. Behind the scenes, Scale AI's infrastructure was labeling drone footage, satellite images, and tactical data, not for Ukraine directly, but for the Western AI systems training in parallel. By late 2022, U.S. defense contractors and NATO-aligned programs were using models trained on datasets processed by Scale. Those models helped automate threat detection, target classification, and rapid intel deployment at war speed. Wang wasn't in the war room, but his systems were helping shape what happened there. He had built something chilling, an invisible backend for algorithmic warfare, one that got better with every conflict. Because the future of war isn't just decided by missiles or troops. It's decided by who sees the battlefield first. And in this new world, that vision ran through a company the public barely know. That invisibility was no accident. It was Wang's strategy, and it made him more powerful than anyone realized. By 2021, Scale AI hit $7.3 billion. A year later, $13.8 billion. Wang became one of the youngest billionaires in history. But unlike other tech CEOs, he avoided the spotlight. No Twitter drama, no tech conference rants, no political crusades, just results and contracts that nobody talked about. This wasn't personality, it was survival. When you're building weapons, publicity is poison. Scale AI's client list read like a directory of American power. The Air Force, the Army, the CIA, the National Reconnaissance Office. These weren't customers who wanted their AI provider trending on social media. While Elon Musk tweeted controversies and Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress, Wang quietly became indispensable to American power. Scale AI now processes data for over 300 organizations, Fortune 500 companies, intelligence agencies, defense contractors, research institutions. Every major breakthrough in computer vision and autonomous systems depends on their infrastructure. Wang had built something too critical to function without, but his invisibility strategy had an unexpected consequence. It made him more powerful, not less. Because when you control critical infrastructure that nobody talks about, you become impossible to regulate, impossible to replace, and almost impossible to stop. But Wang's invisibility wouldn't just protect him. It would allow his empire to spread, deeper, wider, and more quietly than anyone could imagine. If you're getting value from this story and want to see more stories like it, please support this new channel by subscribing. Until recently, Alexandr Wang controlled something no one his age ever had: the data infrastructure powering America's AI war machine. In 2025, that control shifted when Meta struck a $14.3 billion deal with Scale. Wang stepped down as CEO to lead Mark Zuckerberg's new superintelligence division. But even now, he remains on Scale's board, keeping one hand on the very infrastructure he built. Because whoever controls the training data controls the future of intelligence itself. Scale processes the satellite imagery that guides military strategy. Their algorithms help identify targets for drone strikes. Their systems train the AI that could determine who wins future conflicts. Wang has created the ultimate Silicon Valley success story, a company that's too important to fail and too powerful to regulate. He doesn't launch missiles. He builds the systems that tell missiles where to go. And that kind of power doesn't need headlines, just access. But his story raises terrifying questions about the concentration of power in the AI age. In the atomic era, nuclear weapons were controlled by governments, regulated by treaties, constrained by mutually assured destruction. But AI weapons are different. They're built by private companies, controlled by individual entrepreneurs, constrained only by market forces. Wang holds no elected office. He's accountable to no voters. Yet he controls infrastructure that could determine the outcome of future wars. Should anyone so young have this much power over national security? And now, that power extends even further, from the Pentagon's war rooms to the headquarters of the world's largest social network. Epilogue: The Quiet Victories. In the war for artificial intelligence, the greatest victories are often the quietest ones. Wang didn't make headlines. He made infrastructure. And now, he's moved from controlling America's digital nervous system to helping Mark Zuckerberg build his own. Wang is the American-born son of immigrants, living proof of how the US turns global talent into power. But he isn't alone. Another story began with an immigrant himself, a boy from Taiwan who arrived in the US at age 9, speaking no English. By 15, he was washing dishes at Denny's. Today, that dishwasher controls the chips that power nearly every AI system on Earth. His name is Jensen Huang, and his company, NVIDIA, doesn't just compete in the AI race. It decides who gets to run. Watch that story on this channel. Because sometimes the most powerful empires are built by the people no one saw coming. If you're still watching, you're part of the few who actually care. Help us tell more stories like this. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'm John, and this is Silk Street, where we follow the money behind the world's biggest power plays.